clash of ideas and of nations, a struggle for survival, yet a theater of war that unfolded as none did during the Second World War. To the Soviet Union, this was the Great Patriotic War. More than 20 million Soviet lives were the cost of war, the greatest from any single country, every inch of victory paid for in blood. Operation Barbarossa in 1941 marked the beginning of the invasion by the Germans. The towns fell in weeks and heavy capacity of millions of Soviet soldiers. But the Soviets would not give up. To retreat was not to be defeated, but part of a calculated move. The scorched earth policy saw to it that nothing of value was left for the enemy. And so, villages, railways, factories, and crops were destroyed. Civilians were either displaced or joined the chorus of destruction. As hunger and homelessness ensued, these sacrifices even delayed the German advance and contributed to their struggles that winter. That is precisely what the scorched earth was, a character certificate for Soviet resilience.
One of those moments that defined the Soviet people was during the Battle of Moscow in late 1941. The German advance reached the outskirts of the city, along with a lurking feeling of impending fall of the Soviet capital. Stalin would not budge an inch. He mobilized his people with the defiant acts, which included a military parade in Red Square.
Когда на Московском ордена Ленина заводе «Динамо» был зачитан приказ Верховного главнокомандующего товарища Сталина,
thousands of volunteers, men and women, joined the defense, many of them unarmed and ill-prepared. Combined, their sacrifices and the Soviet counteroffensive in 1941 marked a turning point. They prepared for the coming winter and had no choice but to retreat. For the first time, the defense against Moscow seriously affected German offensive and improved Soviet morale.
Stalingrad, the city on the Volga River, became the turning point of the war. Hitler saw its oil fields and supply routes, but the Soviets made a symbol of resistance. Fighting was brutal. Soldiers battled for control of individual buildings, and rubble became the perfect cover for defenders. Under Stalin's Order Number 227, retreat was forbidden, not a step back. Against overwhelming odds and incredibly poor equipment, the Red Army held its ground. In November 1942, the counteroffensive Operation Uranus cut off more than 300,000 Axis soldiers. Starving, freezing, and defeated in spirit, the Germans would surrender by February of 1943. Stalingrad broke the myth of German invincibility and started the momentum of the Soviets.
From Moscow to Kursk, these Soviet counterattacks grew stronger. The Red Army oriented itself with the inhospitable climate, learned from its reversals in the beginning, and in 1944 undertook very big operations like Bagration. These offensives took the war deep inside Eastern Europe and found culmination in the capture of Berlin in 1945. The whole Soviet society was mobilized for war. Factories ran through the night, manufacturing arms, and women went to work. This leadership provided the spinal column of Soviet resistance. He framed the war not just against fascism, but for the survival of socialism too.
Stalingrad was more than a victory. It proves the Soviets could defeat overwhelming powers, including the Battle of Kursk, which is considered the largest tank battle in history, and Operation Bagration, which would create immense destruction in the army group center.
Victory came at an unimaginable cost. Whole cities had turned to ashes and millions died. Yet, the Soviets emerged as a world power and their sacrifice would never be forgotten. This is what victory cost them. This was no battleground. It was a fight for survival, brotherhood, and sacrifice. The Soviets paid in blood.